All right, welcome one and all to the Cosmic Comic Nation, powered by Comic Con Radio. I'm your host, Tom Tormey, and my next guest is the creator of Fearless for Scholastic, Barnstormers for Inside Comics, and he's worked on some of DC's hottest properties, from Green Lantern to Superman, as well as the prequel series to this summer's most anticipated superhero film, The Flash. He's currently writing DC's new hit book, Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow. And it is my pleasure to welcome the immensely talented Kenny Porter to the Cosmic Comic Nation. Kenny, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the very outstanding introduction. I hope I live up to it in the interview.
Oh my God, it's such an honor. You really are. I when I picked up that Flash series over the summer, was it over summer? It feels like it was over the summer at this point. I when I picked up the Flash series initially, I admittedly I'm always hesitant when a property is being adapted, and I was blown away by the book. I told anyone who would listen, I said, if the movie is anything akin to what I just read, we're in for a hell of a treat with the Flash when it comes out in theaters. So it's great, and I mean you're an immensely talented man. You were one of three writers selected as Top Cow's 2012 Talent Hunt winners. And since then, your career has brought you everywhere from Sega to Scholastic and beyond, and eventually DC Comics, where you're now working on some of their biggest properties. But if you could give advice, if you could look at your 2012 Talent Hunt winner self, is there any advice that you would give your younger self about your career and where it went over the course of that 11 years now?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, if I could go back and talk to the Kenny who won that first talent hunt for writing that Top Cow put on, I would tell him to not. I guess basically it would be like not just like worry about whether or not you were going to do something in another publisher and stuff. I would just focus on making the books that I want to read and that I want to share with other people. I think that like once that started happening, I started worrying more about like what my next project was going to be, and I think it gave me a little bit of like creative paralysis. And the best advice I would give myself is just like start making stuff again. It took me about a year like before I realized that like I just need to jump in and start making stuff again. And that's when I started working on Barnstormers, actually, which you mentioned. So I was like, I'm just going to make something that I love, that I would want to see out in the world. And having that advice a little bit earlier, I think would have been super helpful.
Oh, that's solid advice. I mean, living in that moment, enjoying what you're doing. And I think that's solid advice for just about whether you're a writer, artist, or just in any field, just to enjoy where you are. And you work so hard to get there. Um, and your work is incredible. Uh,
Well,
but
thank you.
oh yeah, no, really. But you were eventually able, and you, as I mentioned, you wrote the 3 issue prequel tie-in series for Flash, which is coming out, I believe, June 16th. So you wrote the prequel series to the film, The Flash, the Fastest Man Alive. Uh, did your uh, did your job in writing for that series grant you access to the film, advanced knowledge of the events that's going to transpire? And can you tell me everything right now? No, I'm just kidding, of course. But did that grant you access to the film preemptively?
No, so it's actually a very unique, like different sort of situation. So my editor, Andrew Marino, who's awesome guy, like love working with him, he came to me and said, like, hey, I want to do a prequel series to The Flash, the movie that's coming out. Would you be interested? And I'll be honest, like when he asked me, like I was very forthcoming and like I don't like a lot of like prequel like movie tie-in prequel stuff. So I was like, if I do this, like I'd like to do a very different take on it, where instead of just doing scenes that lead up to the movie or just doing stuff from the movie that's already been teased, like I want to do like a big evergreen Flash story that like old fans would love because they love the early days of the character, or new fans who've never read a Flash book could pick up and get to know this version of the Flash. So he was all on board. That was the same sort of thing he was thinking of. So knowing a little bit of just like the general premise of the movie, I came up with 3 stories, 3 deluxe one shots that were they built off of each other, but you wouldn't have to necessarily read them in that order. I came up with
Mhm.
3 stories about him learning and developing his powers because in the previous films, this version of the Flash we'd only seen had really learned how to use the speed and like hadn't learned how to do like phasing or being able to change his body density with like the Mach punch or being able to leave after images, like a lot of the fun stuff that Flash usually uses against the rogues. He hadn't developed yet. So this story was supposed to be to show like how as a character he's grown between the movies that we've seen and the movie coming out to where he's like a full-fledged hero. So I put together the story I wanted to tell, and Andrew and I worked on it. We sent it over to Andy, the director, and Warner Brothers and stuff. And I was not privy to anything that happened in the movie because it was being kept very tightly under wraps. So it's basically like,
Right.
if I do this, is this cool? Like, because this is what I would want to do to build the character. And luckily, like Andy Muschietti was like, yes, this fits in great with this. He only had like one tiny request of me to put a certain scene in,
Mhm.
just to make sure that it synced up with everything. But otherwise, like I got to tell a story that I really wanted to tell, and I think that comes out in the book that like I'm a huge Flash fan. I wanted
Oh
to
yeah.
just basically treat it as an Elseworlds and as an alternate universe, and that this is this version of the Flash, like building on what we'd seen and leading up to the movie. So like I said, I tried to make it its own adventure. That if you, it's not necessary to read it before the movie, but if you read it, I feel like you'll get a much better sense of where the Flash is coming from at the beginning of the movie. And it sounds like, I mean, you're the test audience. It sounds like you really enjoyed the take, like that I
I did.
the monumental task I gave myself of making it like being set in that world, but making an evergreen story paid off of giving myself that Herlucian.
No,
I can't
absolutely
say
mission
it right
accomplished.
now. My mouth is mush, but yeah, but yeah, giving myself that Herlucian feat. I can't. Why can't I say Hercules?
Herculean.
Herculean feat
Hey,
is what I was trying to say. Yeah.
it's late in the day. It's late in the day for everybody. But I will tell you one of the cool things you said is one of the things that I praised about it, the book is its accessibility. You didn't need to have read the Flash. You don't need to know Barry Allen's Showcase 4. You don't need to go back to the Silver Age and read every story. You didn't need to have an extensive knowledge of the rogues or the top. You don't need to know these things, but you can enjoy it. And you know what? I hadn't thought about it, but as you mentioned, they do kind of. I didn't because as they were labeled 1, 2, and 3. I didn't think that you really could read them non-sequentially or pick up 3 and not 2 and 1 and still enjoy every second of it without having that. And that's a testament to me to a solid book because every issue is going to be at one point a reader's first issue. So that not everyone's picking up a number 1. I mean, maybe they'll go back and get a collection, which is something I want to ask you about now. Uh, the books came out 1, 2, and 3. Are there any efforts to collect them and get them out again with the release on its way of the film?
Oh, yeah. The trade paperback comes out on May 16th. So that'll be in stores everywhere, like your comic book shop, local comic book stores, multiple different retailers. There's also, I don't know if I have one with me. Um, I got a comp of this. There's a box set coming out
Oh, nice.
that features Juan Ferreira's art that I'm holding up for the camera right now. If it's audio, you can't see it, but that comes with the trade paperback for the movie tie-in. So that's all 3 of them all together. The Flashpoint event book, which I think from the trailers we could tell like takes some inspiration from this one, and then the 1989 movie adaptation that
Oh,
Denny O'Neil and Jerry Ordway did. So it's a fun little box set. Includes a bunch of stuff. Like includes our book, includes the one by Jeff Johns and Andy Kubert, which I'm a huge fan of. Includes the O'Neil and Ordway book. It's a really fun. It's awesome. Like it looks amazing. Like it's super cool. I'm so glad that they decided to do that. But yeah, the collected edition will be back. Will be on shelves on May 16th. So people will be able
I,
to get the whole collection together.
I have a feeling. I mean, I was around in '89. I remember picking up that Batman adaptation,
Yeah.
and I remember getting swept up in Batmania. And from what I understand about the press regarding Flash and its reception, this might be the summer of Flash too. We might be looking again. So it's great timing for that book to come out again, and that's a brilliant idea to package all that together, especially for hardcore fans and new fans who may not be too familiar with a lot of the things leading up to that. And they may be saying, who's the gray-haired Batman? Well, you need to find out, and this is a great way to do it. Uh,
Yeah,
over the
absolutely.
and in recent now a few days ago, April 18th, I believe April 18th. I might it feels like a
I think that
uh,
sounds right. Yeah.
the super family got a little bigger because Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow, was released. Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow #1 was released, and it finally kind of brings Connor Kent back into the mainstream DC universe after an extensive hiatus. What do you and in the same way that your Flash books were able to tell us a lot about what we need to know about the character, what should people know about Connor Kent?
Yeah, so Connor originally debuted back in the 90s during the Death of Superman event. He was one of the four, for lack of a better word, like imposter Supermen that showed up after Clark had died. You had Steel had his first appearance. Oh, yep, right there.
Again, for anyone listening on, I'm holding up the this Connor Kent 1993. It's 30 years of Connor
The
Kent.
Metropolis Kid is back.
That's right.
Yeah, so you had Steel, the cyborg Superman, Eradicator, who was the Superman with like the transparent shades, and then Superboy, who didn't want to be called Superboy at the time in the leather jacket. And Connor's deal was that it was eventually revealed that he is a clone of Superman and is half Clark, half Lex Luthor. So he has a complicated lineage and parentage. And he had always been like the more fun, kind of brash character. And through big events and continuity, he had eventually like been left out of reality, put into another reality. And during all the reboots and stuff, he was through different story stuff that was revealed in the Bendis Young Justice run, he had escaped being rebooted and had basically been in another dimension. So when they found him and he came back, he's literally in this newer, like, retooled DC universe that didn't have him in it. People are starting to remember who he is and everything, but like the super family's grown. There's John Kent now, who's Superman's like biological son, who had been Superboy for a point. So like the world's full of supers. Connor's back. He's trying to find his place in the world. But everywhere he turns, like people have got stuff covered. Like there's a lot of people with the S flying around Earth right now. And so this series, what it's really about is him realizing like I've never actually tried to like strike out and find my own territory and find my own mission. That's what I'm going to do. Like I want to go somewhere where I can help people. But because Connor is a bit of a showboat and a bit too much full of bravado, he is very quickly going to get himself in way too much trouble on his own. So instead of being able to stick to Earth, he takes to the stars, and we're going to see him in some really crazy cosmic shenanigans coming up.
I do love myself a good cosmic shenanigan. I what's one of the great lines, and it was set up perfectly in the book and in Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow #1, where as you mentioned, Superboy Connor kind of finds himself one among many supers and is trying to save the day, and everybody saved it already, and all he wants to do is get this cup of coffee back to Pa and Ma Kent, and they ask him, "Do you need help with that?" And I thought, oh, that just has to make him feel. Are you sure you don't need help with that? I think is what Jonathan says to him, and it was sure like he just felt it for Connor, like oh man, he all he wants to do is help. He just wants to find a way to be useful, and there he is. And his sole task is to get Ma the coffee she wants. Ma Kent back to the farm, and it's that one question that was so demoralizing to him, and you kind of felt that you want him to be able to go out. So and I do love the constant shenanigans he gets into, and the book is just a lot of fun. And that to me is what a Connor Kent book should be. The bravado, the boisterous nature of
Yeah,
his actions, and just he's so suave and so cool about it. But again, often biting off more than he could chew. But in this particular case, the book it's not the Metropolis Kid. It's not the boy of tomorrow. It's the man of tomorrow. It's Superboy, the man of tomorrow. What went into settling on that name for the series?
yeah. So obviously, like Man of Tomorrow has always been associated with like Superman and the Superman family. A lot of what I feel like just from like as a reader and someone who loves Connor, like Connor has always been focused on either the present or the past, like wanting to go back to the way things were because you know, he's been separated from this reality. He's just getting to know his friends, or just trying to like live in the moment. A lot of that hasn't been thinking about who am I going to be tomorrow? Like who am I going to like what man am I eventually going to become? And that's what a lot of this story is about, is like I mentioned, like him trying to find like what is the one area that nobody's like the one thing nobody's doing where I can help people, and what kind of like Superboy, Superman am I going to be in the future? Like what kind of name am I going to make for myself? So it's really like a title about him thinking about like I'm Superboy, where is my life gonna go? Like what
Right.
direction am I gonna take it? So it's kind of a big thematic sort of title that also just plays to the history of Superman and loving those titles.
No, that's a really powerful way of looking at it, and I am very curious where he's going to go from here because in the book, and as you mentioned, Connor's duality, especially in terms of his genetic makeup, is often the center of conflict for him. And in Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow #1, you do touch on it. Is that something you're going to delve deeper into as the series progresses?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the aspects that he's going to come up against a lot. The issue's been out for a week or so, so it's no like big spoiler that a lot of the threats he's facing are also like genetic cloned like warriors and things out in space. I'm a big Dragon Ball fan, so I've told people like a lot of my approach to this, like you'd mentioned, like I want to make a Superman book where there was a lot of action because Connor to me is like the scrappy one who like he is first, just like any other member of the super family, to stand in front of a bully and stop him. His
Right.
fault again is that he is really going to enjoy making that bully pay for what he did to the people who were bullied. So he's always like running into scrapes without thinking about it first. And he's going to be coming up against a lot of like sort of threats that he's not used to, things that are more powerful than him. And that's where I try to inject the Dragon Ballness of it, of like similar to that story. If you're familiar with it, when the characters go into space, and that point in the story, like they're kind of outmanned and outgunned in terms of power and everything. So I want to do something similar with him and give him characters similar to himself who've had a different upbringing and a different viewpoint on being cloned or being outsiders. Really, like a lot of the book is about being an outsider and like what that feels like and feeling alone or trying to find a family
Right.
while feeling like an outsider. So yeah, it's definitely going to play a lot into the cloning stuff. It's going to play a lot into where he thinks he fits in the universe and what kind of person he wants to be in the following years of his life.
I would imagine, as some of the things you just said, and one of them in particular is that one of the difficulties in writing a super story, whether it's Superboy, Superman, Jonathan, or any members of the Superman family, is their immense power. And in this particular case, going up against the clones who are themselves immensely powerful has to force Connor to kind of handle himself on a different level. And as a writer, uh, we've seen throughout the history of Superman, where in the '70s, the depowering of Superman to kind of get him onto a more level playing field with the arch villains. But here we have Connor leaving the planet, going and finding adversaries out in the universe who are his physical match, and that's an interesting way to approach it. And it gives Connor a chance to prove himself, not just in terms of his physicality, but in terms of his uh, just ability to handle himself. And it's a very clever way to do it. In terms of
Thank you.
oh well, I thank you. It really, it's got to be, and I always credit. And I'm again very honored to be able to talk to somebody who's writing for the super family because it's got to be a daunting task because you're taking on characters. Now, in this particular case, Connor is 30 years in terms of his publication, but the concept of Superman has got to be a daunting task, and you're handling it wonderfully, and you're adding a lot to a character. So not only is the S a universally recognized symbol on the chest, but Connor is a beloved character with fans. Did you kind of feel any of that uh, pressure? I don't know the story itself of how Kenny Porter ended up on Superboy, but when you did and it was Connor, did you say, you know what, this is a fan favorite character I want to do right by him. What was that process?
Yeah, so it's actually an interesting situation because I had written this pitch in like my little pitch book of ideas right after Connor came back in the Bendis run, and
Right.
I was just like, wow, like I wonder what they're gonna do with him. And then I started thinking about it too much. I was like, well, this is what I would do, like if I were gonna do it, like this, because I love this character. This is the emotional journey I would put him on. And talking to my editor, who Andrew, who I worked on with this too, he was like, hey, if you could do any character at DC, what would you want to do? And I was like, well, I'm like really passionate about this Superboy story. So it was an idea I brought to him. And he was like, you know what? I love this. I love this direction for him. How would you like to enter this into the round robin tournament, which was the thing that they had
Right.
last year where they paired like 16 pitches up against each other. So it literally like went into voting for the fans, and the fans seemed to resonate with the take that we had, that Shanoy Lindsay and I wanted to do, from like an action perspective, from an emotional perspective. And a lot of the beginning of that pitch was just the emotional part of it because like you said,
Mhm.
like there's a lot of people who either like they say they're not interested in Superman or the Superman titles because they're too powerful or they're too strong or they don't see the appeal. But like to me, the biggest appeal to all the Superman books has always been the heart of it. Like
Absolutely.
like I recently reread All Star Superman again for like a book club event, and like I nearly come to tears every time I read it. It's such a great like emotional story about like what it means to be a hero, like what it means to be Superman. And while Connor is like more of the brawler, and I put a ton of that action in there, I never forget that like the greatest power of like the super family is like inspiring hope and giving people hope. It's just, sometimes it's a longer road for some of their to some of those people to get there. And like I said, Connor's got a lot to learn in terms of throwing a punch first and asking questions later, sort of thing. Um, so yeah, so that came together with me pitching it through the round robin and people voting for it. So the fans really showed up in terms of wanting a new story from Connor and seeing him take the spotlight again. Like he'd been introduced and then kind of just, was there, and hadn't had a solo title or anything. So I thought this was a great opportunity to do that. And I got to work with the current Superman team, especially talking to like Phil Kennedy Johnson, who's writing Action Comics right now, to sort of line up like where my Connor is going to eventually end up, where it's his Connor in the present day. Because this series takes
Mhm.
place before his issue, Action Comics 1051, where like the family
Right.
debuts as like a bigger family with like the new jackets and everything.
Yes.
So mine leads up to that moment, and up to his series. So I'm really excited. Like, even if I wasn't working on a Superman book right now, like I'm reading all the Superman books because I'm having a great time with them, and there's a ton of heart in them. Like in
Yes. Absolutely.
Joshua Williamson's main Superman book, in the Jonathan Kent series by Tom Taylor, and the Action Comic series by Philip Kennedy Johnson, and the awesome art
I
teams on all of those. Like, I'd be reading them anyway.
Well, I had an opportunity to talk to one of the artists, Keen Tormey, who shares my
Oh,
last
awesome!
name, and yeah, I was talking about Jonathan Kent, and he reiterates some of the core themes that you had just mentioned, especially about the heart of the characters, really being what is going to draw those readers in, what is going to draw and make their adventures memorable for us, because uh, although the punching is cool and the action is amazing, it's the heart of the character that you're really going to connect with. It's who they are and the quality of it. And the super family are a pleasure to write for, I'm sure, but they all bring their unique qualities. I'm sure Jonathan Kent is going to be written a great deal differently than Connor Kent is, although they were,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Superboys at one point. They are radically different characters. So I'm glad as a fan that uh, you're bringing your passion to the character, and that's going to resonate with us. I remember Johnny Carson said one time, they buy the bit, they buy the gag. If you're selling it well, and if you're into it, that people are going to laugh. And in this particular case, if you're passionate about the characters, so are we. So that is great to hear as a longtime fan. And I have to admit, I'm glad to hear about the impetus of the story and where this came from. But I am curious. Can you give us any indication, without spoiling too much, of course, of where we can expect the Man of Tomorrow to go from here?
Yeah, it's going to be a big like I said, there's tons of action just because like I love like the fun action comics like oriented thing of the Superman book. So we're gonna get lots of big cosmic action stuff, but we're also going to get Connor starting to examine himself of like who he's been, who he's going to be, and like realizing that his decisions and actions have like very big consequences if he doesn't look before he leaps, sort of thing. So it's going to be a lot about him
Right.
like growing from that showboating leather jacket wearing like slugger to being like who am I going to be tomorrow, like who am I going to grow into as like somebody who wears the
Right.
S and like travels the stars and like represents either the super family on Earth or on other planets where people need them.
So two things I want to point out, and that were triggered from what you just said. One of the things that really stuck out about the book, there are certain things. I'm a weird person when it comes to reading a book, and I actually was explaining to a colleague earlier today, paneling and lettering are oddly enough. Before I even get into the book, I'm going to skim through. I'm going to look at the paneling, look at the lettering, and I absolutely love the lettering in the book. How it has that patch quality to it. That was a very clever way to approach it. So that kudos to the team for that. But you
Oh
also
yeah, that was
mentioned, and I
Lucas
have to bring it.
Gattani did that. The
Oh
letter's
yeah,
name's Lucas Gattani, and I absolutely love like it. It made me wish I almost put more captions in the book because when I saw that he had added the like stitch to them, like they were patches, I was just like,
yeah.
oh, chef's
Oh,
kiss! Like absolutely love that.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean that was so cool. It's just, it gave it that perfect touch for the book. It's a great book, perfected by the lettering. I'll be honest with you. I think that was a great touch. And you did mention, of course, Connor is in the leather jacket. So I want to ask you, as we're kind of winding down, I want to ask you if you wanted to play a quick game with me. And here's how it's gonna work. I'm going to give you a character, uh, mainstream kind of DC Marvel characters. At one
Hmm.
point, had adorned themselves in the leather coats, as everybody seemed to be doing in the '90s. Leather coats and oh my gosh, pouches, leather coats and
Yep.
pouches. So we now have Connor back in the leather coat, and I'm going to toss out five people and you or five characters, and you tell me whether or not you think they should be back in a leather coat or absolutely not. All right, here you go. So let's
All
start
right,
with
let's go.
Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, leather coat or no leather coat?
Ooh, it's a good question. I think no leather coat for her, but I think stylistically, I would like it on Cassie or Donna a little
Okay,
bit
good
more.
work.
So yeah, I'm a big Donna Troy fan because I also read in the '90s, and I love Cassie Sandmark too. So yeah, I feel like Cassie or Donna would rock the leather coat a little better. So Diana, I think she's good in her warrior garb.
How about uh, Thor? Thor, I think Thor in the '90s got himself not only a leather coat but like a cut off shirt of some kind, which we could probably both do
It's the
without. But
style
do
of
you
the
think
time.
Thor?
Yeah.
It's just not my style, but someone's style, not my style. The really cool guys wore the leather coats and the cutoff shirts. I missed that.
I think a leather jacket for Thor would be a cool like spin. If there was like some good cool story reason of like why either he was like kind of going incognito or like on some kind of new adventure, I think that could be very fun to do like a leather jacket and like new take on Thor would be really cool.
And our third one for a short period of time. I think I'm not sure if it was one issue or not. I think it was New Titans like 14. Nightwing also wore a branded kind of leather jacket with the logo on it and everything. Do you think Nightwing would look good in a leather jacket?
Um Listen, Dick Grayson looks good in everything.
All right,
So
you can't go wrong.
that's yeah, that's just true. I would honestly,
That's just,
with how Tom Taylor has been writing Nightwing, which is like awesome,
oh
I would love a
yeah.
whole issue where he's just like trying it out, and everybody, including like Babs and the other members of the Titans and stuff, are just like a jacket. Like that's not really your thing. He's like, I can make it work. Like it
Yeah.
keeps. I think it would be really fun to see him at least just for an issue, like you said. Like try to bring it back and it just not working for him.
Right. Everybody's pointing it out. You know what? Nightwing just got superpowers, but really he's had a superpower all along. He looks good in everything. That's his superpower.
Mhm.
Uh, Gambit, Marvel X-Men Gambit.
Oh yeah, I always want Gambit in some kind of coat or jacket. Like
Yeah.
that's the way I like picture him in my head all the time. Like, guys got to have a place to keep all those cards and keep it low
I'm
key.
picturing
So
I
and
can't
hide
picture him
that
without the
stuff.
brown. I can't picture him without the brown trench coat, the long coat. I can't picture him without it.
Mhm.
That's how I. That's I'm with you. That's how I picture him. And lastly, not lastly. That's not a thing. Lastly, Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner rocked it
Ooh.
in the '90s as well. With I don't know. I think right before the Guy Gardner Warrior, I believe. Right? I could be. I could be
Oh yeah,
chronologically.
this was the black leather jacket with the like gold G when you had the
Yes.
yellow ring.
Yep. Yep.
Um, yeah, I would like it. I would think it'd be cool if maybe if he didn't wear it as part of his uniform, but every time that he was like powered down from the ring, he was wearing it with like street clothes. Like that was his street
Okay.
clothes look, kind of like how Hal Jordan has his like bomber jacket.
Right. But
I
Guy
think it
still
would
wants
be
you to know.
funny for him to wear that. Yeah. He's like,
And
I
then
haven't forgotten.
and then as all these heroes are wearing their coats, Connor could go around sewing the yellow S onto the back of them just to make
Without
sure they
them
all
knowing. Yeah.
right. Let them know who the real alpha is there. Uh, Kenny, first of all, I want to thank you so much for your time. You're an amazing writer and an amazing talent, and I'm so glad that you're on a book like Superboy so that Connor Kent can get the love he deserves. If people want to, not only do we want to follow Connor in Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow, as the series progresses, but if we want to follow your writing career, if we want to follow you, where can we find Kenny Porter?
Oh, awesome. And again, thank you so much for the kind compliments. But if you'd like to follow me and learn more about me and my writing, my projects, I have a website. It's portercomics.com. There's links to all my stuff there, but also on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Ken Blake Porter. And there you can usually find links to whatever else I'm doing, but the website is usually your best bet in terms
Wow.
of finding all the other links.
I mentioned before we went on, I just subscribed to your newsletter through portercomics.com. So I can't wait to get that. And I can't wait for Superboy, excuse me. Yeah, Superboy, the Man of Tomorrow #2, and the rest of the series to come out. I'm really excited about where Connor's going and where you're taking him. So again, thank you very much. Everybody, this has been Kenny Porter. I'm Tom Tormey. This was the Cosmic Comic Nation. And until next time, be well and stay safe. Have a good night, everybody. Or day, or whenever you're listening to this. I don't know.